Welcome to our lecture on 1st and 2nd Chronicles. We're moving on through here, getting toward the end. And Chronicles is a restatement of a lot of the history that's gone on before in Samuel and Kings. But its time frame is different. The author is writing to a different audience at a different time frame, and we'll see that in a moment, and the import of it. The name Chronicles was given to these two books by Jerome. The Hebrew tradition calls them the journals or the words of the days, literally. The Septuagint titles these the omissions. In other words, they were considered as supplements to Samuel and Kings, but that's not really quite correct as far as what the author's doing with the books. They are written and shaped, and what is in there is included for a reason. Sometimes there are verbatim copies from the Samuel Kings corpus, but then there are differences, things that are added as well, and things that are left out. So we'll see those. The author, it's not easy to identify the author of the book of Chronicles. It's not stated, but there is someone that really comes to mind as far as tradition. Ezra the priest, or priest scribe, is the one that is looked to. Or perhaps one of his students or one following him in his tradition, one of his scribal followers. But in any case, the one who composes and edits the material into the corpus of Chronicles is adding things at the end that are also used in the Ezra and Nehemiah, the beginning of Ezra and Nehemiah. And Jewish tradition locating this with the end of the writings, so not in the historical books. It's actually in the Jewish canon, put at the very end, and that's for a reason. It's looking forward to Messiah, looking forward to a hope, a Davidic king to come, reestablishing the Davidic line in the land and that sort of thing. So they're looking for that in their tradition. Of course, in the Christian tradition, looking at Malachi and the prophecy in Malachi, looking to a Messiah to come as well. But we know, looking back, looking at Jesus Christ and looking back, that who that is, and they did not. Ezra did not when he wrote this. So, in any case, looking as Ezra as author, then, of course, that also leads to the date and the political occasion. The Israelites in the northern tribes, of course, had long ago been knocked out of the land in 722 BC, and here it is with Ezra. Well, the return of the exiles takes place. 538, the temple is begun and it's not finished, and we have the prophets prophesying that they need to complete it. So in 516 BC, the temple is completed, and then Nehemiah and Ezra later return around 450, around in that time frame, 450 BC. So about 80 years or so, 65 years or so after the temple is built. 80 years or so after the return. So this is the occasion. Persia is still in control of the world, the known world at that point, the Middle East at least. And so Persia's control is still absolute. And the author is writing, Ezra is writing to the exiles, not the exiles, but the ones who have returned from exile. And this is the remnant now. The remnant was those who had been pushed into exile, and now the remnant are those who have returned. So, my apologies. Shouldn't have my phone on. And I won't have an issue with that in the future. So, the occasion then. The Israelites of the northern tribes, again, are out of the land. The Judahites, those who've gone into exile and returned to Judah. Judah is now a temple state. It is, once the temples were built about 516, Jerusalem has no walls. Remember, Nehemiah is coming around the same time as Ezra to deal with the walls of Jerusalem and rebuild and reorder society, because even though the temple was rebuilt and worship was restarted, the people really haven't walked with God that well. They need a revival. They need hope for the future, and that's the setting of Ezra and Nehemiah, and that's really the setting here of Chronicles. for the exiles, what does Chronicles tell them? That's what we're looking for. So that's the occasion, the political occasion that's going on in the book. The spiritual occasion, again, the Jews would never again go back to their idolatry. They finally learned what they needed to learn as far as to worship only God and to not deal with the idolatry that sent them into exile in the first place. And but they still have a need for faithfulness. They still have a need for faithfulness to the Lord. They've come out of this exile period. God has restored them to the land, restored the worship, but there's still problems with how they're treating each other. There's still problems of some with intermarriage with those in the land. We see that coming out in Ezra, and that's potentially may lead back into idolatry. So God sends Ezra to deal with that situation. Geographical occasion, of course, they're back in the land now, and this temple state is very small. It's around Benjamin and northern Judah, right around Jerusalem. It's not a very large geographical unit. It is a geographical unit which is a vassal to Persia in this period, and so all the Persians have all sorts of other vassal regions around as well, across the Ammonites and different ones around. So don't think this is a reconstituted Israel or Judah of the north of the kingdom books, the kings. This is a different thing. They have no king. They have a governor, and the governor at this point with Ezra, or in the time of Ezra, is the Hebrew Nehemiah. So from the book of Nehemiah. The date, since Ezra, again, is most like the author, we're looking at a date around 450 BC. Some would want to push it a little later, say about 400, and maybe it's someone else in his tradition. But liberals typically want to put it from 398 down to 150, but we're looking at about 450 BC for Ezra to write this. The purpose of the book, it's a spiritual history of the book of Judah, and its theology and its prophecy, depicting events that God's deemed necessary to bring them to the point that they're in, and then it gives hope for a future return of this Davidic king and Davidic dynasty. This is what's going on. It is not a part of the so-called Deuteronomistic history. It takes that material and reshapes it. This is very clear that Chronicles also is a historiography. Historiography is not history per se in the sense of, any history book is historiography. Any history book that you've ever read or picked up, it's selective history. It is written to highlight the things the author wants to highlight. So he doesn't highlight the negative things about the Davidic dynasty. He highlights the positive things and the things that they do right. And so that's what this is about. It's not about the things that they've paid the price for. That's been done. That's over. Now they're back in the land, and God is trying to encourage them through this book, through the writings here. Key verses, 1 Chronicles 17, where we have the covenant renewal, and we have the Davidic covenant being talked about. Again, just like in 2 Samuel 7, so there's a connection there. Key verses in 29, 1 Chronicles 29:11. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. Indeed, everything that is in the heavens and the earth, yours is the dominion, O Lord. And you exalt yourself as head over all. So glorifying God as sovereign over all the nations and their nations, sovereign over all of history, and exalting him for that. Another key verse would be 2 Chronicles 7:14, where God says, if I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, and my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. So this is the situation they're in. They've been through the wrath of the judgment of God and being sent into exile, and they're now in hard times. They need to seek God and have him heal themselves, their land, and bring them back into those covenant blessings. that are presented in Deuteronomy 33 and 34 at the end of Deuteronomy. So this is what Chronicles is about. It's about helping them to understand what God is willing to do. He's offering grace to them. He's offering healing and restoration to them in their situation. 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes, it says very nicely, and this is one that I've thought of frequently in my own life. For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. If you're sold out for God, God is looking for you. He knows where you are, but he's looking across the earth for people who can stand in the gap for him, who can do his will, that he can show himself strong toward. People who stand up in faith for him, to trust him and trust in him and rely on him. He wants to support those. Very nice passage, an encouragement to stand up for the Lord and be sold out for him. Key chapters, again, then 1 Chronicles 17, the Davidic covenant, 2 Chronicles 34, the book of the law is found, revival breaks out in the time of Josiah. Key concepts in 1 Chronicles, the sovereignty of God over humankind and history is perhaps the key concept. In 2 Chronicles, prayer is very much highlighted. So the power of prayer is the key to success and the key to victory. Those are key concepts in the books. All sorts of literary features of historical narrative, prophecies, prayers, reports, royal speeches, sermons, all sorts of interesting things. Some, actually, is the suggestion of Lawrence Bott, one scholar, says he thinks that Ezra and Nehemiah just add to Chronicles. In other words, Ezra wrote Chronicles, 1st and 2nd, and then he picks up with Ezra in Ezra 1 through 6 with the exiles returning, which is why his book starts 80 years before he arrives into the land. But that, you remember, Second Chronicles ends with the exile, and then Ezra, you have the first exiles return in 1 through 6, and then 7 to 10, you have the coming of Ezra 60-some years later, and then his reform, and then Nehemiah 1 through 7, it's the memoirs of Nehemiah about building the walls of Jerusalem, and then 8 through 10, you have Ezra's covenant renewal ceremony in Nehemiah, and Nehemiah 11 through 13, it's a continuation of Nehemiah's memoirs. So Ezra and Nehemiah attached to 1st, 2nd Chronicles, really you get this theological history of everything up to the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. So perhaps they all go together, and perhaps Ezra then being the author of all. So in Chronicles, then, a brief outline. 1 Chronicles 1 through 9, the genealogy of Adam. And then 10 through 29, the history of David's reign. 2 Chronicles 1 through 9, history of Solomon's reign. And then chapters 10 through 36, the kings of Judah post-exile. Mostly the negatives are left out here. It's really just a positive viewpoint. It's written when the Israelites are returning, and God's reminding them of the positive things about their history. Let's see, some special contributions. There's overlaps between Samuel's and Kings, and I mentioned this already. 1 Chronicles overlaps 2 Samuel. 2 Chronicles overlaps 2 Kings. So Samuel Kings is about the history of the people. Chronicles is about the history of the temple. And that's very important in their life, in their daily life, in their worship. Samuel Kings is biographical. Chronicles ends up being statistical, somewhat because you have all these returning peoples, and they've got to prove their connection to the Israelites who lived in the land before the exile, so they can reclaim their land, they can reclaim their place in Levitical worship and their service, reclaim their place in the priestly service as well. So Chronicles is statistical. Samuel Kings is very personal, but Chronicles is more of an official record. Personal accounts in Samuel Kings versus more of an official record, the way it comes across. Prophets are very important in Samuel Kings, especially as you get into Kings. And then in the book of Chronicles, it's priests that are the most important. And of course, Ezra being a priest, that makes sense. The throne is very important in Samuel Kings, and the temple is more important in Chronicles. Indictment of their actions in Samuel Kings and holding up the Deuteronomic standard of how they should have acted. And yet Chronicles is all about not indictment but incitement, in encouraging them to live that as they should and to continue in that, be faithful, because there is a hope. Samuel Kings is political, somewhat. Chronicles is more of a religious bent to it. Samuel Kings is really about morals and reflecting about the law. Chronicles is perhaps more spiritual and worship-oriented and service-oriented. Samuel Kings is about Israel and Judah, both, and Chronicles is about pretty much just Judah, because Israel is out of the land, and that's been settled. Let's see if there's some more things we need to talk about. There's this admonition to seek the Lord, stressed 11 times in the book. There's all these genealogies tracing David to his rightful throne, traces the Davidic line and that sort of thing, traces Aaron and the Levites, as I mentioned, the generations from Adam to Zerubbabel. It mentions the dangers of prosperity, the dangers of forsaking the Lord when kings get old and prosperous, and then they forsake the Lord, and those dangers. Has this interesting passage in 2 Chronicles 17 where Jehoshaphat sends Levites out to teach the law throughout the land. That's interesting. Any Christology really has to do with David and Solomon, the Davidic line, and the Davidic line's messianic purpose. So that would be what we're looking at. Matthew, of course, does a genealogy as well and picks up from where Ezra leaves off. And traces Christ's genealogy back through that material. There are some other differences that are interesting. First Chronicles omits David's romantic adventures, his reign in Hebron, his grief over Saul and Jonathan, the sin against Bathsheba, Uriah, his murder of Uriah, the revolt of Absalom, but has a great amount on the preparations of the temple, numbering and distribution of Levites and priests, appointment and arrangement of singers for the temple, things like that. So it has different focus, emphasis. It's highlighting the things about David that they wanted to highlight. It omits, 2 Chronicles will omit almost everything about the northern kingdom, but so much more is given to the good kings of the south of Judah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joash, Hezekiah, Josiah, and their religious reforms and temple restoration and things like that. So more is given there. There are some that are some theological differences that people often point to that you'll want to take note of. One is who killed Saul? That's a question that in 2 Samuel 21, it says the Philistines did so. 1 Samuel 21. Let me think. 2 Samuel 21:12, Philistines. 2 Samuel, I've got my first verse is wrong, but it says that Philistines killed him initially. 2 Samuel says the Amalekite killed him, or at least that perhaps the Amalekite lied about it. And then we have 1 Samuel 31 also that says that it was a suicide, that he killed himself, fell on his sword. But Chronicles says that God killed him. So the answer might be he was shot by Philistines. He attempted suicide. The Amalekite finished him off or just lied about it. But, in the end, it's God that ordained his death and enticed him to go up against the Philistines, which we also see God does with Ahab in the book of Kings. So ultimately, God made sure he met his end at the time that he wanted him to meet his end. There's also this question of who moved David to number Israel. And the census issue where he shouldn't have had the census. It's okay to have a census as long as you take the temple tax that goes along with it. He didn't do that. His motivation was different, wasn't religious. So who moved him? 1 Chronicle 21 says Satan. God is the subject in the one doing the acting in Samuel. There's also the term adversary in Chronicles, which could be could be God. But in any case, it's Satan who incites, God who allows this to take place. Of course, the enemy would destroy us all if he could, but everything is under God's control. And we see this with Job as well. The enemy accusing Job, and God allowing Satan to go just so far, and in order to teach Job about God, about his relationship with God, and also teach his friends as well. Then there's the issue of how many were slain in the defeat of Shobah in 2 Samuel 10:18, 1 Chronicles 19:18. 7,000 chariots and 40,000 horsemen in the AV authorized version in 1 Chronicles 19:18, but in 2 Samuel 10:18, it's 70 chariots and 40,000 horsemen. This could be it's basically a decimal point, but not for us. For them, it's actual words and differences. It could be units here. It could be one. Remember, a unit, Aleph the word thousand can mean a military unit. It could be that the use of unit at times could be used differently by the different scribes. Maybe in Ezra's day, it's a different word or unit, hundreds or thousands for chariots. So it could be something different. But in any case, we can't say that the error there or the scribal problem there is original. It is likely a copyist error and has been worked into the text. And so, again, it's not a great theological issue, but there are those that point to these sorts of things, these minor things, and say, well, the Bible it has errors in it. And that's not the case. We have a great text and a great faith in the text that we have received for many, many reasons that I've already gone into before early on in the class. Let's see if there's anything else. There are other alleged contradictions. There's a whole list of them, but I'm not going to go into them where scholars say, well, there's this and that, who defeated Goliath, and one says David, and one it says that there's another person is named. It could be another Goliath in the other instance. There's just all sorts of different ways that these can be correlated, reasonably correlated. But of course, again, scholars will say, well, there's an issue there. The whole thing's corrupt, which is not how they treat other ancient Near Eastern texts. So there's a double standard going on. But in any case, there are those sorts of issues, copyist issues, or perhaps we don't see it the same way that the scribe who's writing it down sees it, and he's using a different thought process of how he views the data. Sort of like three people on the same street corner seeing an accident at night, and one of them says the car is green, one of them says the car is blue, and one of them didn't even see the color of the car, and it's all about the lighting. Because on one side of the street you've got a halogen light, and one side of the street you've got a white light, and this person on that corner is seeing the reflected white light, and the other side they're seeing the reflected halogen light, and the different paint looks different in different colors of light and things like that. So there's perspective of the witness that's seeing it can also be a major portion here. We may just not see the context like they did. So there are these things. All right, next time we'll see Ezra and Nehemiah. That's a quick overview of Chronicles. And again, this is at the end of the King's Corpus. It's not found with the historical books. This is written to encourage the people. Take care.